Now, throughout these reviews, I'm going to be giving away some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movies, then turn away right now. If you have, then let's get on with the review. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was released in 2002, once again directed by Chris Columbus, and is obviously based off the J.K. Rowling book of the same name. Harry Potter and his friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, played again by Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson, are returning to Hogwarts for their second year to learn witchcraft and wizardry. But as they're at Hogwarts, mysterious events start happening where students are found to be petrified, and there's writings on the wall saying that the Chamber of Secrets has been opened, and once again, it just delves into a much larger plot that Harry and his friends have to solve. So with the first Harry Potter movie being a huge success, obviously there was a lot of anticipation for the second one, myself included, because I loved the first movie. So as a kid, I like anything as a kid, I was really looking forward to seeing the continuation of the Harry Potter story on the big screen. However, with Chamber of Secrets, I don't think this one has particularly aged well. It is directed by Chris Columbus, it does have the same crew from the first movie, but maybe that's the reason. It feels too much like the first movie, rather than try to do a few different things to make it stand out from the first movie. But that's not to say there aren't good things in this movie. For example, the production design is still phenomenal. Hogwarts looks incredible. And the set for the Chamber of Secrets looks really cool. It's just very haunting, dirty, grimy, and mucky, that it does help lend itself to the slightly darker tone of this movie. We also get more world building within the Wizarding world here. For example, we have traveling by Floo powder, we have the Whomping Willow, which is a tree that attacks people at Hogwarts. Pretty much imagine if the kite-eating tree from Charlie Brown became a mass murderer. And we also get more knowledge on the different types of wizard families, like the purebloods, which both sides of the family come from a long lineage of wizards and witches. And when we get more development on the families, it's more specifically the Weasleys and the Malfoys, because we see that the Weasleys are kind of poor. They're not, like, homeless or anything, but they're poor, they don't have much, but they're very humble and caring to all wizards, whether they're pure, half, or muggle-born. But then you have the Malfoys, who are rich, snobby, they think they're above everyone else, and there is a little bit of rivalry between two families, and it is a real great contrast. And then Half-Blood is obviously one side of your family is wizard or witch, the other side is a muggle, which is what Harry is to an extent. His mother was muggle-born, but his mother's side are all muggles, and his dad's side were all wizards and witches. And one thing that I really love about this movie is that it touches upon the theme of racism. And what's so clever about it is that it uses wizards, witches, magic, and elves to tackle that subject without it really feel like it's being crammed in your face. For example, this movie introduces the concept of house elves, particularly the character of Dobby here. He serves the Malfoy family, and they are not kind to him at all. They literally treat him like a slave. Draco in this movie was not just your stereotypical kid bully like he was in Sorcerer's Stone. Here, he's a downright racist, and he is truly a despicable character this time around. And that really comes into play when he refers to Hermione as a mudblood. Basically a racial term for wizards and witches whose parents were muggles. But it's cleverly done, and in a way where it doesn't slam the message down your throat. One new addition to this movie that I really love is Gilderoy Lockhart, who's played by Kenneth Branagh. Basically, he's the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher after their first one, Professor Quirrell, just kinda had a demon on the back of his head and died. But whatever the case, he is a great character, and he's just like this cocky, full of himself writer, and he thinks he knows everything, but you find out later that he's just full of bullshit. And one of the elements that I really love, and this is kind of parallels actual elementary school, or middle school, is that all the girls are just so fascinated with him and think he's charming, but all the boys just don't understand it. It just reminds me of back when I was in elementary school and middle school, where when the girls really loved something and just went crazy over it, the boys were conditioned to hate it just because the girls liked it. It's weird logic when you think about it, but when you're a kid, that's kind of how your mind works. And another good thing I can say about it is that there's a piece of music in here, once again by John Williams, the theme for Fox the Phoenix. Whenever I think of Chamber of Secrets, that theme really comes into play, and it's really a beautiful theme that sometimes I play around during Christmas time. And the rest of the score is good, but the problem is a lot of it is either rearranged or directly lifted from the first movie's score. And the reason for that is because John Williams was really busy in 2002. He was scoring Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, Catch Me If You Can, and Minority Report. So he didn't really have that much of a commitment to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and could only score new material when he had the time to. But regardless, it's still a good score. But let's move into things I didn't like about this movie, because Chamber of Secrets is actually my least favorite of the Harry Potter movies. If I can get back to the score really quickly, there is one part in the Quidditch match that is directly lifted from the speeder chase in Coruscant from Attack of the Clones. It's just played at a lower pitch, but if you listen very closely and then play that speeder chase sequence in Attack of the Clones, you can really hear that similar piece of music. And one issue that's really not much of a problem with the movie is that the more world building this does, the more questions you kind of have. For example, there's a scene when Professor Snape is yelling at Harry and Ron that they took the Weasleys' flying car to Hogwarts because they missed the train, and that the car was seen by Muggles. And Professor Snape's pissed off that they exposed the Wizarding World. And you just want to stop Snape for a second and go, well, why is your entrance to platform 9 3/4 in the middle of King's Cross, where hundreds of Muggles can see you guys walking into a wall and then disappearing? How does that not expose you to the Wizarding World? If you, the viewer, are watching this, have read the books, or have a better memory of them than I do, and know the answer, then leave a comment down below. I'll greatly accept it. But you have to keep in mind that the movie has to work on its own. It has to explain things that make sense in the movie world and can't rely on reading the source material beforehand. It should stand on its own. So that's just one issue that I had. Another issue is that the movie is too long. I know some people complain about Sorcerer's Stone being too long, but the reason I don't have a problem with that is that the pacing is very well done. And there's always something interesting going on. And if it's not moving the plot along, it's focusing on building the world that J.K. Rowling cooked up. But here, it just feels like it's too long. There are some scenes that really feel slow and dragged out. Now, I do have one criticism that is one of those, in the book they do this, in the movie they do this criticisms, which this will be the last time I'll ever do that for this series of reviews. But there's a scene where Professor McGonagall, played by Maggie Smith, is teaching Transfiguration to the students. Suddenly, Hermione asks Professor McGonagall if she can tell the class about the Chamber of Secrets, to which McGonagall just drops the class and starts going into the history of the Chamber of Secrets and Hogwarts School as a whole. Now, if you're just watching this as a movie, it doesn't quite make sense for McGonagall to do this, considering that she's a very strict character, and personality-wise, while she does have a kind heart, she is very strict when it comes to teaching. So it just feels very out of place for her to just suddenly drop a lecture and start talking about something that gives us, the audience, important plot information. Now, in the book, the history of the Chamber of Secrets is told by a character who doesn't appear in the movies, Professor Binns, who is a ghost that teaches history of Hogwarts. See how much more sense that makes? A History of Hogwarts teacher telling the students about the Chamber of Secrets makes a lot more sense than a professor of Transfiguration stopping the class to tell everyone about the Chamber of Secrets. Again, I do not mind at all when movies make changes from the books or its original source material because they couldn't work in feature film form. But again, this was another example of a change that they could have worked into the movie. And plus, introducing Professor Binns, you introduce more characters, and the concept of, oh hey, ghosts can be professors at Hogwarts too. That's really cool. So those are all issues that are big flaws to me, but they're not enough to really ruin the movie. What does ruin the movie, however, and this is really a bad thing to say, it's Daniel Radcliffe. In this movie, Daniel Radcliffe is so dull, so bad, and so lifeless in this role. I mean, in the first movie, I let it slide because he was a kid. He had a much higher pitched voice, and it was his first movie, so you could cut him a little slack. This time around, his voice is a little deeper, so he can't act all cute anymore. He has to really develop in his acting abilities, and throughout this movie, there's not one moment where I felt like Harry Potter was either upset or concerned about anything. For example, when Hermione is petrified, there is not a moment where I believe that Harry Potter was upset. When Dobby tells Harry Potter that he prevented him and Ron from getting on the train at platform 9 3/4, I don't believe at all that Harry Potter is mad. And that's another sidetrack thing I'll say, is that I find Dobby to be really irritating. I know he's a fan favorite, but with what the movie's presented, he's just... he's too clumsy, and his methods of trying to save Harry Potter make him come across as a real asshat. I know Dobby has good intentions, but I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of him. I actually really like Dobby in the book, but for the movie, But for me, the one moment that really showed how bad Daniel Radcliffe is in this movie is that Harry has a giant battle with this beast in the Chamber of Secrets, the basilisk. He kills the basilisk, but not before getting stabbed by one of its fangs and being poisoned. So this is all to save Ginny Weasley, who opened the Chamber of Secrets. And Ginny sees Harry wounded, and she goes, "Harry, you're hurt." But the way Daniel Radcliffe pulls off this scene is that he just does it like he does every other scene. There's not a point at all where he's, like, worried, afraid that he's gonna die. In fact, watching this movie and that scene, I was really waiting for that Monty Python the Holy Grail moment to pop up. "Harry, you're hurt. Don't worry." Don't worry? You've been poisoned by the basilisk. No, I haven't. Well, what's that then? I've owned worse. You liar! I was seriously waiting for that moment to happen because I just didn't believe that Harry Potter was dying. So in the end, this is actually a tough movie to recommend. I mean, overall, I think it's okay. And this is coming from someone who really likes the book. I really like the book. I like the second book better than the first one, but in terms of the movie, not so much. It just feels lifeless. It doesn't have the same energy and wonder that the first Harry Potter movie did. So it's really hard to recommend this. At the same time, as we go throughout the series, it is an important chapter in the Harry Potter story, so... Oh man, this is a real tough one. I'm gonna say... I say watch at your own risk. It has some really, really good moments to it, but I really do think that this is the weakest of the Harry Potter movies that we have. There's just not a lot of energy to it, and again, I really like the second book, but the second movie, not so much. And that's my review for Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Check back next week where I'll be reviewing my favorite Harry Potter movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban. So, until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below to tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And then as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.